Welcome to Tackle with TAC 4. A little bit smaller crowd tonight, but thrilled to have you all here. We're doing who's not been here before? First time? Okay, so about 2/3 of the room have been here before, and I suggest that maybe you haven't been here before because we're doing a very different thing tonight than we've done in the past. Tackle with TAC 4, we tackle the issues, not each other, and what we've done prior is have debates on heated political topics with panelists from opposite sides of the aisle on the topic, and yet with a different set of ground rules, which we'll go over in just a minute what the ground rules are. And what we have found is that even though the ground rules have helped us have a more respectful debate, we still get emotionally hijacked. We still have not completely seen the other side's needs, heard what they're saying, heard what their concerns are. And so tonight we're trying a different format to try to get to dig deeper and to really hear what the other side has said. And we'll talk through the format in just a second. So in essence, what we see is that this is our political landscape. We just yell at each other a lot, being deeply entrenched in our way of living. And so what we're trying to do with TAC 4 is provide a very different venue so that we can have rational debate where we're really hearing the needs of the other side, hearing what the fears are, what we're trying to protect, and what our solutions are. And if we can meet the other side's solutions as well as our solutions, then we're actually going to make progress. And we so seldom do that in politics. So that's where we're trying to get to. And we want, really, the goal of this entire evening is to show you all how to think differently, how to, when you're having dining room conversations on politics, or when you are on Facebook yelling at someone on the other side, how to have that conversation more respectfully, how to think differently before we post. Because so often we say things like, well, the other side just thinks such and such. Do they really think such and such? Or is that just what your perception of them thinking that? And then you saying those misperceptions really polarizes us and makes that divide a lot wider. And what we want to do is solve our problems. That's what we're trying to do here, is solve our problems. And by doing so, what we're trying to do is hear the other side, hear what their needs are, change my solution so that it encompasses not just my needs, but also the other side's needs. So that's what we're headed for. So the sponsors for tonight, we have TAC 4 Solutions is my company. The way this entire event got started is because we teach these principles in business and have a lot of success in business bringing clients together. Our clients who, let's say the CEO thinks that he's smart and everybody else is stupid. And we change that paradigm. We give him a paradigm shift, change his mindset so that he realizes that his staff is contributing the same as he is, and how can he bridge that gap and change his thoughts so that they actually solve problems together. We've had a lot of success with what we call the 9 ground rules of cohesive team behavior, and we brought those to this arena because people challenged us and said, how did these apply to politics as well? Also, Kaizen Technologies is actually a client of TAC 4, and Mike Spence over here is from Kaizen Technologies, as is Nathan Formwalt, and they are sponsors for the event. Go Beyond Consulting is Lynn Schussler-Williams, and she has a table over here as well for you to see her stuff. Creative Workshop is the place that we are in. It's a fantastic place where we try to come all the time for good team building. It's a good out-of-the-box mentality to be here. And ACLU of Kentucky will introduce our speakers in just a moment, Kate Miller, and Advocates for America Radio Network, Tomas Mauricio, will introduce them in just a moment. So the way this is going to play out tonight is that each panelist is going to have a 7-minute monologue. Then we're going to, one-on-one, we're going to send one of the panelists out of the room, and we're going to deep dive with one of the panelists and get to their true core needs that they're trying to meet, the fears that they're trying to protect against, and how their solution solves their own needs. The coaches over here, Lynn and Mike, are going to help us to dive down and get to those answers. Then we're going to swap panelists, do the same for the other panelists. Then we're going to swap again and do another deep dive with the first panelist, showing the other panelist's needs. So with the panelists out of the room, we're going to show them, here's your needs of the other side, and you have to actually believe these needs. You have to believe that they're valid, and you have to see that how your solution is not necessarily meeting their needs yet. How can you tweak your solution? That's the second 15-minute swap, and then finally we'll bring the panelists together for a true debate. Still living by the ground rules, which we'll talk about in just a minute, and then we'll have some audience participation for anyone who wants to chime in. So we'll be here for a little while. Hope you're ready. Hope you're rested. So let's very quickly talk about the ground rules. Show respect with no hint of blame. Pretty self-explanatory, but not something that we see in politics. Be respectful in your debate, but not just respectful. Don't blame the other panelists. More than that, don't blame the people on the other side in general. No accusations. We're trying to actually solve problems here, not trying to just talk about how the other side's messing it up. Okay. Ground rule 1. Ground rule 2 is assume positive intent from all on the other side. This does not mean that in every situation we are all having positive intentions, but it does mean that overall, in general, all of us are trying to make the world a better place. And so get in touch with that on the other side, the people on the other side, how they are also trying to solve problems just as you are. They have a different view of how the world should look, but their intent is still true to make the world a better place. The third ground rule, understand and care about the other side's needs, fears, and proposed solutions. We've already talked about that this really is the goal of the new format, is to get down to these true core philosophies, what the needs, fears, and how your solutions solve that. Ground rule 4, do not complain without offering solutions with realistic action steps that meet both sides' needs. So we want problem solving here, not just analysis of how the world has gone wrong. Ground rule 5, clarify opinion from fact. So often in political discussion, we state our opinion as though it is truth, as though it is absolute fact, including we state surveys or statistics or studies that have been done to back up our opinion, but we say it, well, because this survey was done, see, it's clearly true. And yet there's another survey that has the exact opposite conclusion. And so what we're trying to say here is it's okay to bring statistics and to bring surveys and studies, but recognize that this is your opinion. This is not fact. So we want the panelists throughout the evening to say things like, I think, I believe, my opinion is, instead of this is the way life is. Okay? Ground rule 6, seek the truth and workable solutions over political positioning. So we are going to be vigilant about protecting against entrenched thinking. No political positioning. We actually want everyone pursuing truth and trying to solve problems. And finally, ground rule 7, where there are core philosophical differences, clarify without accusation. So this recognizes that we do come to political discussion with value differences. That's okay. What we're trying to do here is to dig down and get to the root, the core of those value differences, so that we can then see the foundation of what built up all of our solutions. So those are the 7 ground rules that the panelists have agreed to live by. We've gone to dinner and talked through them, and I think they're both well suited for this discussion. They've got great mindsets for tonight. So let me introduce our coaches. Mike Spence over here is the VP of Relationship Services for Kaizen Technologies. Kaizen is a Microsoft Solutions provider serving Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and is currently the Microsoft Heartland Provider Partner of the Year. So very big recognition for Kaizen. They're a fantastic company, and we're proud to have them around. And our other coach is Schussler-Williams of Go Beyond Consulting. She's an inspirational speaker, transformational coach, and she specializes in accelerating sales results, driving through change, creating a life you'll love living. She's actually a very deep thinker and great motivational speaker, so we're proud to have Lynn around as well. And then finally, our panelist for the night, Kate Miller, is the Program Director for ACLU of Kentucky. And she focuses on education and advocacy regarding voting rights, about abolition of the death penalty, immigrants' rights, which is why we're thrilled to have her tonight, and youth programming. And she's on all sorts of boards, so we're thrilled to have her here. Thank you so much. And Tomas Mauricio is a fascinating man. He's the host of Advocates for America radio network in Danville, Kentucky. And he has had an extremely varied life. Concert pianist, educator, mentor, real estate broker, life coach, political analyst, and now a radio talk show host. Well, not just now. You're doing multiple of those all at once. He's a fascinating man. He's also a first-generation immigrant and is writing a book, Building a Nation, Immigration Through Respect, Not Walls. So on the back of one of your sheets, there's even more information about both of the panelists. Thank you very much for being here. And so what we are here to talk about tonight are the primary problems with our current immigration policy. And I believe Kate is going to go first. Is that correct? And we will keep the ground rules up for the evening, and you're free to sit, stand, whatever you want to do. It's your part of it.
Can you all hear me without the mic?
Yeah, possible.
Oh, we just make the recording.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, can you guys hear me still? Okay, so my name is Kate Miller. I work at the ACLU of Kentucky, and I thought that I could best illustrate the problems with our current immigration system with a story. So I met my friend Sagar Padavindi about 2 years ago. He's from India, and he is undocumented. And you all might hear the word illegal, and I use the word undocumented usually, but I would say they mean about the same thing, so whichever word you're familiar with. So Sagar came to this country legally, along with the rest of his family. I hear a lot of misinformation about undocumented immigrants. I think people wrongfully assume sometimes that undocumented immigrants cross the border illegally into this country, but many, if not most undocumented immigrants come to this country legally, either through a temporary visa or some sort of tourist visa. So Sagar was in 6th grade when they moved to this country, and as soon as they got here, his dad started the process, continued along the process to petition as a legal permanent resident. Sagar was in middle school when his dad's first petition was rejected, and in high school when it happened again. And awaiting a third review, their family was broken apart. So his petitions were rejected because the federal government believed he was overqualified for the job that he worked at a hotel. So when their family was broken apart, Sagar's dad was forced to return to India for his third review, and Sagar, his mom, and his 2 brothers stayed here in the United States. Had Sagar returned to India at that time, or today, none of his educational credits, or it's my understanding, none of his educational credits would transfer. So they stayed here, and even though they've been dealing with the system for years, they still believed that they would be able to become United States citizens at some point. So eventually, Sagar's own visa expired, but in spite of this, his life continued pretty normally. He graduated high school, he started working at hotels in Eastern Kentucky, and he was even admitted to Eastern Kentucky University, where he saved up and went to school, paying out of pocket. I think that's pretty unusual because I know I went to in-state schools, and I used student loans, and most of my friends used student loans. And undocumented immigrants are not eligible for financial aid. They're not eligible for the overwhelming majority of scholarships, and they're also not eligible for student loans. They cannot even borrow money. So Sagar paid for school out of pocket. And I think that this, just to go on a little sidebar here, there's, I think, a lot of misinformation about undocumented immigrants and public assistance generally. Undocumented immigrants aren't eligible for student loans. They're also not eligible for welfare, for food stamps, for housing assistance. Even refugees who are here legally are not eligible for most types of public assistance until they've been in the country for at least 5 years. There are some categories who become eligible sooner. For example, I think Cuban nationals are eligible after a couple of months, but the overwhelming majority of immigrants are not eligible for these types of assistance. And furthermore, according to a Cato Institute report, even when immigrants are eligible for public assistance, they use it at a much lower rate than native-born citizens. And I know I'm referencing a report there, so we might want to be skeptical of that, but we can move on. So let's return to Sagar. He is still in school now. He transferred to the University of Louisville, which is where he goes today. He works a night job at UPS, and he's actually currently looking for a second job. Anyone is hiring, grab me afterwards. In 2007, Sagar's dad from India was finally procedurally approved for status. So this is very exciting. But because of the backlog on Indian immigrants in particular, it would be at least another 8 years before he might be able to return to the United States. I think a lot of people might think that undocumented immigrants are here because they jump the line, but the reality of the situation is, for many immigrants, there is no line for them to get into. For example, there's no entrepreneurial visas, or they have been in line for years and years. Another friend of mine, MK's family, has been waiting for almost 20 years at this point. So Sagar has not seen or touched his own dad in years. And he's getting older, and he's endured some health problems. And so ultimately, Sagar's mom decided to return to India to take care of her husband. So about 2 years ago, Sagar and his two brothers drove their mom to Stanford Field, and they walked her off to her flight with the understanding when they said goodbye that they may never physically see their mother again. Even if their dad is allowed to return, if he's granted this status, it's likely that their mother will be permanently barred because she stayed in this country as an undocumented immigrant. So on a personal note, I can relate to this separation from a parent, and I'm sure many of you all can as well. Not even a year ago, I lost my own dad to a serious illness, and it was one of the most devastating experiences of my life. Like I'm sure many of you all can attest to your own experiences. But to have been absent from him, to have been unable to visit him in the hospital, or thousands of miles away from my family, is unimaginable. And undocumented immigrants are forced to make these sacrifices all of the time. I've heard many stories about people losing a family member, not being able to return for their funeral or to visit them. Now, I don't believe Sagar's separation is entirely like a death. Obviously, he still talks to his parents on the phone, and they Skype so they can see each other. But the real tragedy is that unlike my separation, theirs was entirely avoidable, arbitrary, and sad. And this is common. 25%, well, according to my research, about 25% of undocumented immigrants who are deported leave behind United States citizen children, so about a quarter. And that doesn't even take into account people like Sagar, people who are undocumented themselves. So, is it time? Oh my gosh. Okay. So, obviously this is a challenge, but there is no risk too great, I think, for anyone when it comes to our children. And people like Sagar, and people like Sagar's parents, moved to this country to work hard and make a better life for their family. And instead of making life harder for them, we should have a common sense system in place that allows everyone a roadmap to citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. And now, Tomas. 7 minutes, and by the way, this is Nathan over here, and he's the timekeeper, so he'll give us 2-minute warnings for each break, and then he'll finalize.
Well, let me begin by first saying, big voice, so we'll stand a little bit different. Let me begin by first saying thank you so very much to Mr. Claypool and this organization in putting this forward, and thank you all so much for being here this evening. Immigration is certainly a hot topic these days, and it is a topic that needs to be discussed and needs to be addressed. I presume that later as we go on, you may correct me if I'm mistaken, Alan, that we go back to some of the things that Kate said that I would disagree with, but one of the problems that we have with immigration is that there are a lot of words that are used to define people, and these words don't really do a good job of defining anyone. If anything, they stigmatize people and put people in places that they really don't need to be in. Now, I know many of you might be thinking, well, wait a second, is Tomas going to agree with Kate, or is he going to take a different point of view? My own background, my mother immigrated to this country, my father immigrated to this country. I'm first generation American. My mother was one of 13 children. She came here from Cuba. In 1960, at that time, 1959, when Fidel Castro took over Cuba and became a communist country, at that time only one of her sisters had immigrated to the United States. From 1960 through 1976, I watched my mother fill out paper after paper after paper, as the P's and P's out there, trying to get her siblings, as well as my grandparents, her parents, out of Cuba. Today, the system is just as bad, if not worse. The issue of immigration, and Kate sort of touched on this, when you have people in other countries who want to leave that country because what we have in the United States of America is so far superior to what they have as their life. Just as my father, with a second grade education, immigrated from Spain to come here to have a better life for his family, so do millions of people around the world want the same exact thing. But when in a legal process of immigration, you are told that even if you do the paperwork correctly, it may take anywhere from 7 to 20 years to be legally admitted into the United States of America, for your admission to be granted. Then this leaves a situation of hopelessness. And I think we can all understand that. If you are living in an impoverished country, you have children, and you want something better for them, you don't want to be told, well, even if you do everything correctly, it'll be 20 years. If you're told that, then the alternative would be, I'm going to do it anyway, which then would bring the term illegal. Because there is a due process of law, and if you don't follow the due process of law, you can sugarcoat it, use all these terms that are put out there, but the bottom line is if you do something against the law, it's called illegal. Now, there are differences between documented and undocumented, and I'll be happy to talk about that afterwards. I'll be happy to talk about visas. Again, in one of my businesses, as a broker, I actually represented a client who was here from Thailand, who had a visa. And he has a wife and a couple of kids. And he came to me and said, Tomas, I want to relocate my business and I want to buy a house. I'm making really good money in my restaurant. I said, fine, let's go to the bank. We went to the bank. And my banker friend called me the next day and said, by the way, Tomas, he doesn't qualify because he has the wrong kind of visa. So there are many, many issues that place walls in front of people who are trying to do the right thing. We have heard recently that there are several people, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, now they have a committee up in Washington, D.C., well, it was just a few weeks ago. They all have some kind of idea. But I'm here to say to you that in my book, when it comes out soon, you will see that it has a different idea. I am a constitutionalist. I don't consider myself to be a Republican, a Democrat, a conservative, or a liberal. I'm a constitutionalist. And that's the path that I take. How many minutes? 2 minutes? Very well, thank you. So, I'm not going to be up here pushing the right wing or the left wing or any wing. I'm just going to present to you my years of experience, my study of the Constitution, what I truly believe is what America should do. We, as Americans, should do. We have to get past all the mumbo-jumbo, the political speak. I don't want to hear about ACLU is a bunch of liberals. I don't want to hear that Tomas is a right-winger. That's not getting anything solved, just as Alan has pointed out with the process of TAC 4. What we have to do is we have to have courage and leadership. All of these things can be resolved quickly if we have courage and leadership. I have a big mouth. I don't have any problem being a leader of anything. I'm always picked to be a leader. It doesn't bother me. But I'm talking from a political perspective. I'm talking about elected representatives. These are the people that actually have the power. Immigration has been an issue since the first time the United States government passed a policy, 1790. The next one, 1795, and it kept going from there. The last big immigration policy was in the 1980s under the Reagan administration. There have been other acts that have come forward since then, but it's all, when they talk about, some of the current acts that are out there that are 20,000 pages, you can only imagine how many pages fill up a law office dealing with immigration. It's unbelievable. So I hope that we can have an open discussion, and I hope that I will be able to present to you from my own life experiences, having been being a first-generation American, what it means to immigrate to the country legally. Thank you.
right, now the fun begins. Thank you all very much. You stay. And Tomas will be escorted out by Eileen Cease. Thank you very much, Eileen, for helping. And Tomas is going to go put on headphones so he doesn't hear what we're talking about. So, this is Tom Boulay here helped us to come up with this whole new format. I'm not blaming you, I'm blaming me for it, sorry. But giving you credit where it's due. And so the newlywed game kind of came up as a format for what we're doing here. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I'm going to kind of walk over to the board, and Lynn and Mike and I are going to ask you questions, but in essence, what we're going to try to do is get down to your core needs that you are trying to fulfill with immigration in general. And so I'm going to write the word needs down right here. Okay. And we're also going to get to fears. Are you off? You all are on now. Yes. Yes. And fears, we'll get to those also. And then finally, what your solutions are. We've got 15 minutes to do this, not a lot of time. So, are there any questions that you all would have, or would you want to just start with talking about what needs you're trying to solve?
I think the need I'm trying to solve is to respond to the broken immigration system with policies that are inclusive and manageable for the long term, and don't jeopardize individuals' civil liberties at the cost of national security. That's a little specific. That's not too specific.
Did you say at the...
Well, we just leave that out there.
Don't jeopardize civil liberties. We'll stop there. Okay, talk more about inclusive.
So, not to use, I will use another short story. I think the system that we have now has made an underclass that's really vulnerable. And for example, in Northern California, we represent a client who's an undocumented immigrant. She was a victim of domestic violence, and when she called the police took her away in handcuffs. And it was because of her immigration status and the very specific policy that I won't get into. So I'm really concerned that any new policy could have the same consequence of putting people at risk by their spouses or exploitation from employers.
I'm going to put that as fears would be exploitation from employers.
Okay.
But I do want more explanation of that.
Okay. So, for example, the same stagger that I talked about in this story worked. I don't know how many hours a week, but he worked in a hotel for earning under $6 an hour. And I explained, regardless of your immigration status, you can approach the Department of Labor, the cabinet in Kentucky. I think it's cabinet to try to, get the wages that you're entitled to. And because of his immigration status, he was not interested. Another undocumented immigrant that I know.
Do you have a question? No.
Sylvia, her dad is undocumented. He works doing seasonal work most often in construction. He had worked on a project, and the employer skipped town without paying him. And again, I said, there's a person who works for the cabinet who speaks Spanish. He serves Hispanic Kentuckians. You can contact her. She can help garner these lost wages. Not interested. Immigration status made them very fearful. Does that explain?
It does, but there's a...
So what I want to know is what's the need behind... and I want to say put the word policy up there under needs, because the broken system, what she said was the need was policy to address that, right?
Yeah.
So in that need, say more about what a policy would do to address that fear. How would a policy address the fear? If someone's undocumented, how could a policy solve what you're getting at as a fear?
for example, there are policies in place under the Bashir administration that do protect workers. However, I think a lot of workers don't know that, so I guess education, or are fearful, so I guess more education, because sometimes, you know, like if you're a victim of domestic violence, you can be eligible for a particular type of visa. However, why would anyone know that, you know? However, I don't, you know, like we wouldn't even need to worry about these policies if we had a pathway to citizenship for people who right now are not eligible. Because I think as a citizen, hopefully you would feel more confident to approach law enforcement or...
You know, I was going to say, hi Kate, you did a really good job on the showing respect, because you're not really blaming this other side that I find at all, but you're really blaming the process. You know, so that's great. You know, so you're blaming this process, this system you have in place. Yeah. So you're welcome. But what specifically, as we look at the ground rules, I mean, you're not complaining about things without offering real solutions. I mean, what would you do to speed this thing up? I've heard you both talk about the length of time that it takes for people, and that seems to be a real issue. So, is one of your needs, would it be okay to say you would like the process to be clear a bit faster than it currently is?
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to really get into a lot of those details because I can't explain why it takes so long at this point. I do think there are some institutional unfair policies. You know, we accept more immigrants from some countries than others. We have different, like I gave the one example, you know, Cuba, there are different policies, and I think that that can be inherently unfair. Also, it's just dated. I think that there are, I heard a really interesting story on public radio recently where they talk about entrepreneurial visas, and I won't get too much into the details. I mean, I can, but I don't think we have a lot of time. So I think that there are some inherent problems. I don't know why it takes so long, though. I don't know why families have to wait. I think it's interesting because we have Customs and Border Patrol is the largest law enforcement agency within the federal government. It has 60,000 employees, according to their website. I don't know why you would lie about that, but I guess they could boost their numbers to be impressive. And so I wonder maybe if some of those resources were diverted into the people from like INS who are processing, maybe that would be a solution. So like diverting resources away from law enforcement and into processing visas.
I have a question, but I don't know what my question is, so I want you to help me with it. You were talking about a minute ago an immigrant's hesitation to go get their civil rights, to go report something,
Right.
because of their immigration status. And I'm not asking this from one side of the fence or another, but it does seem like there are some on the other side who would say, but the fact that they are undocumented means something.
That they're not,
That they're
they
not,
shouldn't be eligible for
I think
they're not.
I think there are people that would say they are not legal and therefore should not be eligible for those things. Is that true or not true of the situation?
I mean, I think that's a good question, and I don't think there is a clear answer, and if there is, it's above my pay grade. It's a weird system because our immigration system is civil versus criminal. However, when people are facing deportation, they spend a great deal of time being detained in prison-like places, and some are even confined to solitary confinement, and you don't get a lawyer like you would in a criminal trial. So there are rights that are not afforded to immigrants in this process.
And is that okay or not okay?
I don't think it's okay. I think that...
So does that mean that you would want all people, not just all people who are citizens or even currently on the path to citizenship, but you would want all people on the planet having access to
due process?
it almost seems like to the benefits that citizens have.
Well, if you look at our Constitution, most of the issues that I deal with, it's not specifying citizen versus people. I mean, obviously some specifications are made, for example, when it comes to like voting. You have to be a citizen to vote. I mean, I don't think that everyone on earth, well, in a perfect world, yes, everyone on earth should be afforded the civil liberties outlined in our Constitutional Bill of Rights. I don't think that's practical at this point, but in a dream scenario, I would be down with that.
Certainly. In a dream scenario, I think all of us, in our nation at least, would be down with that. But there are constraints in life. Mm-hmm. Meaning there's only so much money. I'm not trying to get into the debate here. I'm trying to get to the core of what your real goal is for all people who happen to be in the nation to have all of the both civil liberties and benefits of citizens.
What do you mean by benefits of citizens? Like being able to vote?
Exclude that. All the others?
Like having access to student loans?
Sure. Having protection
well,
from an employer.
If we can specify benefits and responsibilities.
Go.
Because, I mean, a lot of people don't know that many undocumented people are issued, their acting numbers, that's what you call them, where you can pay your income tax. Obviously, many immigrants participate in the system, but they do so for other reasons, not because they're necessarily forced to. I mean, in some circumstances they are forced to. So, like, fully participating in society, so you would have the same benefits and you have the same responsibilities, like paying taxes, and you'd be eligible for student loans. Does that make sense?
It does. I have a question, and this is just, I don't know where this question came from, but it's just like you were saying, I'm not arguing for a side, it's just a question that comes up when you say what you all are saying. The thought that comes to my head is, then everybody on earth is going to want to come, and right, you just said there are limits to resources and limits to whatever, and so how do we, in what you're outlining, how do we get at what this policy you would like it to define as where those lines are?
I cannot specifically give you a quota at this point on what I think would be a practical number of immigrants to admit into the United States. I think that's something that Congress should be able to do. Emphasis on the word should. However, it's not necessarily true that everyone would enter the United States, because actually immigration is on the decline right now. And I mentioned Customs and Border Patrol being this really large law enforcement agency, and they're continuously adding staff. In spite of that, apprehensions were at an all-time low last year, because fewer and fewer people are crossing the border, at least, in the borders that we have. So definitely it's totally reasonable for Congress to have a scheme that puts some limits on immigration, but we should probably make those limits workable. And when we've had, 10 to 12 million, he says illegal, I say undocumented, I don't care what word he uses. It doesn't seem to be working at this point. And it's important to note, there's a really great speaker, Ron Crouch. I don't know if anyone's ever heard him speak. He speaks a lot to business groups. And he makes a really amazing point, I think, that it's like, we shouldn't be kicking people out. We should get the border with cookies and lemonade, because in most developed countries, we're not reproducing at a rate to support the systems that we have in place, like Social Security. The workforce is aging, and we need younger people to enter the country. So he's the type of person that should be a part of those conversations, I think. And certainly, Tomas mentioned we haven't had serious immigration reform since the 80s. We have a very different landscape. So maybe it's something that they should be revisiting more frequently.
Can I ask you, since we only have a couple of minutes, if nothing changed for 10 more years, it's going to stay exactly the way it is, what fear do you have for our country?
I'll tell you who should have a fear.
Okay.
We are a nonpartisan organization, but at this point, it doesn't matter it does matter, of course, whether or not we provide a pathway to citizenship for those millions of people. But so many, our country is changing, whether or not we legalize that specific group. We're becoming more diverse, and that's really going to influence the electorate. So if nothing changes, I think that there are going to be some changes to our political structure. Does that make sense? I don't know.
You're getting there, but you don't want to say it.
Yeah, I don't want to say it.
Okay.
The Republicans will be screwed. You will be, as a party, if I think that's one major consequence for them. And I think that they're losing out a lot because there are many conservative, religious immigrants coming to this country. They would probably.
So are you saying then that you want to fix these things and find solutions so that Republicans won't be screwed?
No, I don't care what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Both parties can screw themselves.
Write that down.
But no, my fear is, my legitimate fear is that human beings will continue to face really unnecessarily harsh realities. And that families will continue, without a doubt. Obama's deported more people than the previous administration did in their 4 years. So we're going to continue to see families broken apart. And
You're fearful for those families being broken in the front of it. Okay. If nothing
like
changes.
bottom line, I mean, I think for a strong economy and for other policy reasons, it's important to embrace immigrants. But bottom line, I don't think human beings should suffer. What do we have, like 20 seconds? I had an amazing meeting with actually a representative from the state house where he was talking about a client who is a couple, and the man's, it was a heterosexual couple, and the man's mother needed some sort of transplant. He went to Mexico as an undocumented immigrant to provide her with this transplant. When he illegally crossed the border back in the United States, he was in the back of a semi-truck with like 60 or 70 other men, and he died, and about 16 men died in this semi-truck. And when they found their bodies, they had been, and this is, I'm sorry, disgusting, they had been peeing in a bucket and drinking it. That's how they were trying to live. And that happened? That happened in the United States? Like, no one, I don't care where you fall on politics, no one wants that to happen. And I think that's like what scares me the most.
Okay, we're out of time, but I did want to write down some things and see if you approve, and feel free to reword things that I've written down, okay? So what I've written are that your needs are that we are inclusive. By that all people currently in the U.S. have most, don't outline what those are, certainly not voting, but most benefits and responsibilities as citizens. Is that accurate to what your need is?
I mean, yeah. Actually, I would say most people currently.
Okay. So who would be excluded, just for clarification?
Get rid of this.
Oh, at all?
So most people currently in the U.S. have benefits and responsibilities as citizens.
Okay. So
The only reason
you don't mean voting.
No, I mean voting.
You mean voting? Okay. Okay. Are these accurate for your fears? Exploitation from employers, civil liberties of immigrants being violated,
and citizens.
and citizens.
Because like a lot of the systems in place that would be bad for immigrants, we think would be bad for, like a system called E-Verify or Real ID would also be bad for citizens too.
Okay. Okay. Harsh realities faced by human beings and was broken apart. Solutions, we didn't get too much into them, but certainly a quicker path to citizenship.
And I would say fairer, that's the word.
Mm-hmm. Fairer policies.
Path to citizenship.
Quicker and fairer. Okay. Fantastic. So you're going to hide the board. Taking some logistical issues here. We're going to hide the board from someone. We're just going to erase this and we're good. So did we get down a little deeper? I know if we had 45 minutes, we could have gotten even deeper, but a little bit deeper, I believe, than sometimes. Tom?
I don't know. I guess I was thinking we'd get more to a core issue, but I wanted to ask her was, does she believe that there should be no? I mean, this would be a simple thing. If you want to let everybody who wants to come, just fill out a form, put where it instantly approved.
Yeah, we'll get to, this is good. We'll get to audience participation and during, I should have mentioned this before, if you all have some contributing questions, not to debate, I don't want you all yet to get into debate, but if helping us get to the core, Tom, like you're talking about, feel free to jump in.
That's the core thing. What do you believe about
This.
people, about how people get here, what should be the policy?
Okay, so feel free to jump in with those questions. Again, I don't want you all debating the issue yet, but if we're missing some of those deep dive questions, feel free to help us. Okay? Tomas, welcome.
Greetings, salutations, and felicitations.
Okay, so I believe where we started with Kate was help us understand what needs you're trying to meet with whatever solutions you would provide. So what we're ultimately trying to get to.
You want me to tell you what I perceive as the problems in immigration? What I would suggest as the solutions, is that what we want?
That will help us get there, I believe. So I'm going to write down needs, fears, and solutions. And you just talk, and I'll take notes, and they'll ask questions, and they may ask questions to help us get down to the true needs. Go for it.
All right. Well, as I said in my opening statement, immigration is certainly a very hot topic. And I think the problems that are connected to immigration are the reasons why it's a hot topic. So if someone said to me, Tomas, what do you see as the problems in immigration? Well, I would say the first thing that we have to understand as a problem of immigration is that the current laws, all the acts, all of the policies that have come forth from the capital of our great nation since the very beginning, as I said, since the first one in 1790, they've become so convoluted that not even a top-of-the-line immigration attorney can give you the answers, because it's almost impossible to know what it is. It's no different than, my attorney who specializes in taxes. If you ask her a tax question, she's brilliant, but she can't possibly know all the reams of paper that have come out of the Capitol dealing with taxes. So I think the first issue that we have at hand is that we have policy and law that is unenforceable, unusable, and creates the problem that it's trying to solve. In other words, it actually places people in positions where they have to break laws and they have to disregard policy in order to have immigration. And so that's not really the way that this country should be. Along the way, many good things have been thrown out and many bad things have been put in. So my first thing would be to say that we definitely have to have a revamping of law. And from my perspective, it would be throwing it all out. There's nothing worth keeping. Not a single thing. And instead, we need to have leadership, as I said before. Someone needs to step up, not just regurgitate the same old. And, I don't want to hear about the one side saying amnesty for all and the other side saying no amnesty at all. That solves nothing. But there are solutions to fixing that. So, yes, ma'am?
So, I was just going to say, what I think I hear you saying is a need would be get rid of the current laws and policies and replace them with ones that are simpler and enforceable.
That's correct.
So again, under needs, Alan, I think the top word is policy.
Yes.
And it's get rid of the old completely here.
Well, as an example, anyone who goes through the immigration process, it's expensive. That's the first thing, because you have to hire an immigration lawyer. The second thing is
because they're too complex. Because the law.
Exactly. Because many times I've been told I should be an attorney because I already know more than most attorneys. Okay, great. But as I say to you, if you really get an immigration specialist, I have a friend who specializes in only Japanese immigration. This tells you how complex it is. He only does one nation, Japan. That's it. And when I visited with him to try to pick his brain, he said, "You feel free to use my library." Well, his library is, sizable, and it's all immigration law. Now, imagine somebody who is trying to immigrate here from Japan, let's say as an example, and they're just a worker. They have no clue. Now, do they also have $50,000 to pay for an attorney? No.
So what need are you trying to meet then, based on simplifying the law?
I believe that the law needs to be replaced. Simplification, as you said, because I believe that our country, if we look back, again, being a constitutionalist, if we look back, our country was founded by immigrants, and it continues to have a number of immigrants who come here, and that is part of what makes our nation great. But it becomes distorted when you have elitism come into play. As you and I know, somebody mentioned that there's an article that came out recently about, well, maybe it fixes, make everyone pay $50,000 to become a citizen, be able to legally immigrate. Well, that's ridiculous. That's an elitist point of view. Okay, my father had a second-grade education. He had 3 kids. We all graduated from college. I have a PhD. My brother has 2 master's degrees. So if you were to say, well, we're not going to let him come in because he's a second grader, we're only going to keep engineers, architects, people who are, that's an elitist position. And just because you have a piece of paper doesn't mean you can grow it, by the way. So I would say that we have such convoluted policy that the number one need we have is throw all that out, simplify. It shouldn't take any more than 2 pieces of paper to fill out and say, this is why I want to come to this country, here's who I am. Now, along with that, I think that we have to make use of technology. That would help us in the simplification process. And maybe many of you have heard about the E-Verify issue. I promise you that it might be difficult for the small business. I'm a small business person, but I promise you that it is something that has to happen if we want the need to be fulfilled here of simplification, if we want better policy.
I have a question for you, Tomas. Hello, by the way. Good. So let's assume that your laptop's going to. Let's just assume that the policies we have in place aren't simplified in this next round of discussions with our leaders, but maybe stays the same or gets more complex. What fears do you have if that's the case?
All right. Well, when Alan invited me to do this, and I read through the documents and said fears. Yeah. I'm in fear. The only thing I fear is cockroaches. Other than that, But I don't know that I have any fears. What I would say is that, as an advocate for America, which is why I named my show the way that I did, I'm for my country. And I believe that if we continue down the path that we're going, where you just add more paperwork, more policy, more acts, more laws, then indeed you're going to actually create even more illegal immigration. You won't be able to stop it. As I said, people talk about, building a wall, or they talk about this $50,000 payment. It's good. Let's all talk and let's come up with some creative ideas and see what does really work or doesn't work. Fear, I guess the fear I would say that I would have would be that we continue to destroy what really is the core of our country. Everybody in here, with the exception of my term, everybody else in here is not a Native American. At least I don't think so, correct me if I'm mistaken. So that means that at some point in your lineage, your people didn't come from America. And when people say to me, this is the discussion I have about slavery, they start talking to me, I'm like, hold on, I'm first generation, okay? My heritage actually from Spain, we were actually in prison, we were enslaved by another country. So, I think that we all come from someplace else, whether we're Italian or we're Irish or we're French or we're Spanish or Scandinavian or whatever. And think of how great our country has become because of that, because of the immigrants. So, again, my fear would be, I guess, that it continues to become worse and we continue to have an explosion of illegal immigration.
I just had a question to, great name by the way, my name's Tom as well. What I want to get at is, what is it that you want to see at a basic level for people in this country and for people who want to come to this country, who are not citizens? What is it that you want for them?
I often mention this on my show. My father, having only a second grade education, sometimes he didn't really know how to express himself. But the one thought that he presented to me, as well as to my siblings, life isn't fair, but there's always opportunity. And if you work for opportunity, when it arrives, you can make use of it. And so I would say that I believe that every person on the face of the planet Earth should have the opportunity, if they wish to immigrate to the United States of America, to be able to do so. Without having to wait 20 years, if they're willing to hire 17,000 plus people to work in the IRS in order to collect taxes, they can certainly hire 17,000 plus people to work in immigration to speed up the process so that you don't have a 20-year wait. There's no reason that they can't go through those pieces of paper that are there sitting on different boxes and shelves and whatever else in a 2 to 3 year period. If you did that, as our nation would do that, then people would say, I don't have hopelessness. I can wait 2 or 3 years. If that's all it's going to take, I can wait 2 or 3 years. So if you ask me what I would hope for, that's what I would hope for. That everyone who wants to immigrate here has the opportunity.
And would you say too that, and the paperwork doesn't take?
They should have the opportunity without having to hire an attorney, without having to fill out 17, without having to write a dissertation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a question, is there a fear in our society, American society, of immigration?
Not mine. You mean what I hear from other people?
No, just as you see the United States, is one of the issues that we're dealing with a fear of immigration?
Some people fear immigration. Absolutely. Because when I discuss, part of my being a host of a radio show is that I go out and seek people's thoughts, seek their opinions about things, because that's what they want to hear me talk about. So when I have presented myself in other places dealing with immigration, I ask, what do you feel? And you will get all kinds of misconceptions. Well, we're running out of resources. We let all these people come in here. We don't have enough resources for all these people. That's not true. It's sort of like what Alan was saying. They'll quote a study. Well, I saw this study that said this. And I, of course, will say, well, if you want me to, I'm really good at research. I'll be happy to show you 6 studies that actually go against what that one study says. We have a lot of miscommunication about what immigration really is. And we have a lot of people who are fearful, in my opinion, what I hear from people when I talk to them, is that they're fearful of the influx of another culture. Now, there are problems, and I would say to you, it's not a fear, but I understand why people fear this. I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud to be of family of people who came from Spain. My first language is Castilian Spanish. I'm proud of it. I do not salute the Spanish flag. I do not put the Spanish flag above the American flag. Okay? But there are people who have come to this country who do that. There are people who, in the title of my book, see, it's not about the walls, it's about respect. The respect I'm talking about is the respect of the United States of America. If you're going to immigrate here, then you should do so, if you want to immigrate here to become a citizen, then you should do so without, by abiding by the laws.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into the debate of it as much as how dominant or how irrelevant is we as a country of immigration, or does it play at all?
Could you restate that again? I'm not sure the question.
Do we as a society, United States society, have a dominant fear of immigration, or is it not a factor at all in this discussion?
I think that there is a fear.
Okay.
And I think that the fear is promulgated by media. I think that the outpouring of misinformation.
I'm not worried about how it's occurring.
Yes, there is. Just to answer your question simply,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is a fear in this country by the United States citizens about immigration.
Yeah, so this is probably my ignorance talking, and I hope this doesn't come across as my fear. I don't think I have a fear of immigrants or immigration in general, but just hearing this, everyone should have the opportunity to immigrate here that wants to. It almost sounds like you're wanting it to just be like a checkbox that, hey, if you want to come on in, check, you're a citizen. And my question would be, you said we don't have limited resources, that's okay. Yeah. I would have just wondered, why haven't we done that then? If not because, why do we put limits on how many can come from each country if not because of resources? What is the other reason that we put limits on?
Again, over the time, since the beginning of this country, people have been frightened by things. When there was a big influx of Asians who came to the West, working on the railroad, the United States government passed an act limiting, which is still in effect to this day, the number of immigrants that can come from China. Now, I recently attended a seminar a couple years ago because I wanted to find out what the numbers are. 2,200. That's it. 2,200. How many people are in China? 3 billion.
More than that.
3 billion. So now if you just do simple math, that's ridiculous. And that law's still in effect. And here's what happens. It comes forth, I think it's June 15th, I think is the day that they're allowed. June 15th is the first day, June 16th is no month. All 2,200 go. Now, that's a problem. And that comes from an old fear. Because people were fearful that, oh, these Chinese workers are coming over here. And you'll hear that if you ask me about that we still have this fear. Yes. Yeah. Oh, you know, these Mexicans are coming in here and taking our jobs. You know, these Russians are coming in here and taking these jobs. You name a country, they'll pick it. So there is that fear in many parts of our country about immigration.
Just because we're out of town, I'm sorry. I want to make sure that we have this written down to accurately represent what you're saying. Needs to simplify the current law.
There still has to be law, because I wanted to address what you said about a check mark in a box. Okay. I'm not just talking about, it's an index card with a check mark on it and then you go. No, we still have to have viable laws. There need to be laws. We're a country of laws. I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution. So we're a country of laws. But it should be a simplified process, whereas anyone who desires to be here should have the opportunity to do so.
Which is my next sentence. Everyone should have the opportunity to immigrate here that wants to.
That's correct.
Down solutions I have, throw out the laws as is, replace with simpler and enforceable laws.
Correct.
Preferably 2 pieces of paper to fill out.
Well, I just use that as a, it may be more than 2 sheets. Sure, it works. Okay, but we have technology. And this is another point that I want to bring up, because we don't hear this when we talk about immigration. We have the technology. If you want to do your taxes online, you do your taxes online, and if you put in the wrong name, wrong social security, they'll get it right back to you. It doesn't take 7 years. Immediately you get a response from the IRS. Sorry, wrong information. So we have the technical ability to do it, and we should make use of that as part of the simplification process.
Okay. And then finally, for fears, I have that you have a fear of that you're trying to protect elitism, thank you, in policy. That's why it's wrong. Elitism, there we go. Elitism in policy, and creating more illegal immigration. Help me with that. An
explosion of illegal immigration.
If we do not, because
if we don't,
yes, we do not, then as it perpetuates itself, it will get worse rather than better.
Perfect. Okay. I think we are going to swap again, and we will show Kate your board, and then we'll bring you back to show you her board. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Like where we go from here is different.
So let's go. But different from what you expect.
It is different than what I expected, but that's okay. I'll let you all talk some too.
Hi, Kate.
Welcome back, Kate.
Hi.
Okay, so we're going to show you Tomas's board and have you respond to it in various ways, which I'm not sure it's going to be so difficult for
Yeah, it's
you.
pretty good.
Okay, so his needs are to simplify the current law. Everyone should have the opportunity to immigrate here that wants to. His fears are elitism in policy, creating an elitism. Somebody want to describe that a little bit?
I think what he was saying was, if we create parts of the policy that say we only want to take people who have a certain level of education, or we only want to take people who are qualified for certain jobs, or that sort of thing, that creates an elitism in the policies. Well, I think I heard him say.
And go on with the second.
And then he said, if we don't, the fear is if we don't make the changes, if we live with the current policy and we go on for another 20 years, that it will just create an explosion of illegal immigration because nobody can do it legally because it takes 20 years.
And so his solutions are literally throw out all the current law and replace it with something that's incredibly simple. He said at the end, exaggerating when he says 2 pieces of paper to fill out, but he does mean to where you don't have to hire an attorney in order to be able to fill out your paperwork. Okay? And that we should make use of e-verifying technology.
So my initial response is I'm down with almost all of it. The only thing that there's probably some disagreement is e-verifying technology.
Keep going.
So, are people here familiar with e-verify? Yeah.
Tell us more.
No.
Yeah, tell us a little
Tell us more
more.
about
And get just a little
And
closer.
I'm not like an e-verify expert, although I have read the memorandum of understanding several times that companies have to sign on to. So basically, e-verify is an online database between the Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration, where theoretically you can verify someone's eligibility to work in the United States. So it wouldn't just be citizens, because there's plenty of people who can work here who aren't citizens, but just whether or not you're eligible. So we have problems with e-verify because it was started as a pilot program, and at least the studies that I'm familiar with, which now are a couple years old, but diverse from the Government Accountability Office, so like their own internal review from outside sources, is that there is a great deal of error within e-verify. Now I know it's getting better, and in fact I think I even heard like, oh, it's like 1% now. But
Error around.
Let me give you an example. I heard a story recently when I was at a conference about a woman in Florida, not an immigrant, white woman, from the U.S., hyphenated last name. They like accidentally put a space before the hyphen when they were entering it into the database. And it took her like years and a lot of money to try to fix that error, and in the meantime, it was incredibly difficult for her. I mean, it depends on the business, but if the business uses e-verify, then they're going to recognize that there's a problem. We've also got, so we think that it's...
So what was attempted as a simplification of the process, if there are errors, can sometimes even make it more complex.
That's what we've learned. And business groups, like I've lobbied against e-verify in the Kentucky General Assembly. It has not passed. I'd love to say it's because of my successful lobbying, but it really had nothing to do with it. The reason why it didn't pass is because business groups oppose e-verify. And they might do it for very different reasons. But, so we've heard from like the chamber, there was a Supreme Court decision a couple of years ago, and it was like it was the chamber that filed it. The other issue, or one of the other issues we have with e-verify is I think it puts, like I said, it puts a burden on the employer. And it can be pretty technical, or I've heard it can be pretty technical, and we think that it could even be used to in discriminatory ways. So it could be used against, people who appear to be immigrants or something like that. So we're worried that it might be used in a discriminatory way. But we're not going to get everything we want.
Which goes in line with your civil liberties need.
Yeah, and same with technology, which like I'm not an expert on technology and privacy, but as technology advances, there are more and more civil liberties concerns. The government has new and exciting tools to use for surveillance, and so we are just wary of the government having a lot of access to individuals' personal records through whether it's E-Verify or if it's, I don't know, specifically.
I would guess the current immigration policy does as well, though, whether it's with E-Verify or paperwork. That's the same.
Well, like, here's
information.
but like if we had E-Verify, it would be for everyone in the United States. It wouldn't be for immigrants only. That's the whole point. That's how it's not discriminatory. So E-Verify is put into place, like, and it's mandatory. It's mandatory for all individuals living within the United States. It wouldn't be like, or at least my understanding is it wouldn't be specifically for immigrants, because how the heck would you know if they're, you know, like, well, then what? So that
I don't know if
was,
that's true.
As a recovering HR person, I think it would be something you have to do for each person. Can I ask a question?
recovery.
If the errors could be eliminated, then are you still opposed to E-Verify?
Good question. Easy to make a joke here, like when is the government's errors ever eliminated?
When are errors ever eliminated?
Right, exactly.
But
I meant to say it's like that.
I'm trying to ask this.
You're trying to get from an idealist perspective.
What's the core,
Yes.
what's the underlying
Good.
need issue that you have around it?
I think the underlying issue probably is the idea of a government-run database where information is personal, private information is uploaded to a government database. Is the underlying fear that that could make people vulnerable.
And how is that different than what we have today?
Well, what database? Like Social Security?
IRS.
Yeah, I don't know that it would be.
Yeah, IRS.
Yeah, there's lots of examples of where that already exists. So it's like not our priority, but we don't like it. We don't like E-Verify.
Well, if I may, I think it's real helpful to set on it.
Yeah, that's true.
What's the problem with it? Because you gotta come up with solutions at some point. Seems
Right.
And I'm not trying to advocate for it or against it, but it seems like not a bad deal to say, is this person
Eligible to work in the
are they
United
eligible
States.
to work in the U.S.?
I mean, for a long
benign
time,
system that tells you that, at least you got a starting point.
and as an HR person, you're probably familiar with like I-9 forms, right? So like, what would you say was the problem with I-9 forms?
Because it's really easy to forge documents.
Okay. So do you think that that would be eliminated with the use of E-Verify?
And E-Verify is a stronger system than I-9. Because the I-9, so the relies on that person showing you documents. It doesn't go to the validity of the document.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's legitimate. There has to be a way, I guess, to determine whether or not people are eligible to work in the United States. I guess. I mean, why, actually? Why?
Well, so Alan, that was my question: is if we've agreed on throw out the current laws and bring in more simplified, user-friendly.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't really know that I think we should just throw out all laws. I mean, it is a very complex system for good reason in many circumstances.
Such as, because I'm also hearing you say, why should there be any restriction on someone working in the U.S.? I think I heard you say that just now.
No, I'm not.
So then why should there be a law?
Just make an observation. It's interesting to the question you just asked. The reason why this is being created is because you have so much regulation on both sides and so much oversight and overreach on both sides that E-Verify is basically a CYA for employers to say, see, I did the best I could, I checked, and they seemed like they were in there. And it's basically a response to something that may or may not need to be there.
Yeah, like
And so you've got a reaction to a reaction to a reaction to a reaction, which ultimately creates something that, by its very nature, is never able to have a perfect solution. It's never quite in balance. It's always something reacting to the other side, which is imperfect at its beginning.
Yeah.
The idea that it's going to somehow come into balance when it's 8 times more bureaucratic is
Yeah.
a bit of a distraction.
Yeah,
Well, and we're almost to it. Oh, go ahead.
Well, and the point that you made, already employers, when they want to, find ways to employ people under the table or through some sort of like subcontract. So already you see people sort of being pushed, like the example I gave earlier, that was a subcontract. Sylvia's dad, a contract was awarded to someone, there's a subcontractor, he's the one that managed Sylvia's dad. When the work was done, he skipped count without ever paying him. He obviously didn't enter into E-Verify or have filled out the 99 form.
But I'm even hearing from you that you don't see the need at all for any of these because you want.
I don't know if there's a need.
But am I right that I'm hearing you say everyone should be able to work here?
I'm saying I don't know enough about employment law or what it's like to run a business to make recommendations on it, to make non-very specific recommendations when it comes to managing the worker eligibility of your potential employees.
From a civil liberties perspective, you want everyone to be able to work here?
No, I'm saying I don't know. Like, I don't.
That's kind of big, isn't it?
Well, and I think,
Not really.
are we allowed to look at her board too?
Sure.
Because I'm trying to remember the wording of something that I think would be helpful. But what I was trying to get at earlier when I said if we're agreed on get rid of the complex law and simplify it and all of that use of way.
Well, I agree with that. Get rid of it.
Okay, so let me finish that sentence because we went off on this whole big thing and I never finished it. What I was trying to say was, if we have this new simplified system where it doesn't take 20 years to come here, where you can get whatever the law is around a work visa, you can get it, right? And then the one at the bottom, Alan, I can just barely see it, is,
Quicker
now you're standing in front of me.
Oh, this one.
So then, do we really need the E-Verify if everybody gets the right? I mean, that's what I was trying. We're debating this big. Is the technology? Can we agree that the technology would be much simpler if pretty much everybody had the yes check mark? I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, would we even have the problems with the E-Verify if the laws were reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like what you were
Without
saying
saying,
about like we're reacting to reacting like
The question, well, the one thing I learned from either one that I keep waiting to hear is when you tell the story of the sign. Do both of you or one or the other of you believe that the children of immigrants should be allowed to stay from and do whatever they shouldn't have to have? Is it grandfathering? Is that what they're calling it? They shouldn't have to apply because they were traveling.
Oh, well, see, Sacker wasn't born here. I mean, we already have, the 15th Amendment, that if you're born here, you're a United States citizen. So,
No, he was brought here. That's better.
yeah, he was, see, already, he was brought here.
Can he stay? And because he's here,
Yeah, I mean, we would think he should be able to say, his parents would be able to say.
We're out of time for you.
Okay.
So I still feel like we have questions, but we'll get there during the open debate. How's that? So why don't we swap again? I think I'm needing you all to help us still some more. And it may be that we have panelists who are more in agreement, and that there are people who aren't on stage that are in disagreement. Okay, and so what do we do? How about you all just ask Tomas these questions? Because I think Tomas is on the side that, or I expected him to be on the side of some of you all. So we'll let you all ask him some questions. Welcome back, Tomas. What we are finding is that
there are many similarities between the two of them. So now I'm going to actually tell you the real truth. That's what it is?
Yes. So we want to first show you what Kate's board was, which was her needs are to be very inclusive. to the point that most people, and she has not yet defined what most means, but most people currently in the U.S. should have benefits and responsibilities as citizens. And we used to have the word most in front of the word benefits, most benefits. And she asked us to remove that. I even said, even voting, she said benefits, all. If you're in the U.S., you should have the benefits and responsibilities of citizens. That was her need. Her fear is, without this, we have exploitation from employers, civil liberties of immigrants and citizens being violated. Harsh realities are faced by human beings in general. Families get broken apart. Solutions without any details, just to get quicker and fairer path to citizenship. So let's start by you responding, but we also have some questions from the audience I believe that we want addressed to you. So we'll let you first respond.
You want me to respond to
what she has on her board, yes.
Right? So she wants, as her need, she believes that the inclusivity of more people who are currently in the United States to have benefits and responsibilities of citizens.
Yes.
So you want me to say agree or disagree and why?
Yes. Let's start.
Disagree.
Okay.
And the reason I would disagree is there's a key word there, citizens. If you are a citizen, yes, you should have all the rights, God-given rights, as well as constitutional rights, as well as responsibilities of a citizen. But if you're not a citizen, no. Now, you could live in this country. It would be no different than, let's say, for example, since my first language is Spanish, I have no problem moving to Spain. None whatsoever. So if I move to Spain, do I have the right of all the Spanish citizens? No. See, one of the things that people don't understand is that this is the only country in the entire world that doesn't immediately imprison people when they're here and they're not citizens. It's just a reality of life. And I don't have to quote a study or anything else. If I go to Spain, I went to Spain, last time I was in Spain was more than 10 years ago. My wife and I were walking down the street in Madrid. And I asked her for something she had in her purse. And we stopped, and she put her purse down next to a small wall that had an iron kind of fencing, I guess you want to call it. Within a few seconds, I heard the sound that I know quite well. I told my wife, don't move. And I looked up and we were surrounded by people with weapons. Now, because I am fluent, I immediately said who I was and what I was. And because I was there as Professor Mauricio, and, I have a different position, they treat people with education differently. But anyway, I did not have the rights of a Spanish citizen. They could have easily said, you know what, Mauricio, slap the cuffs on you, should have never put that person, you could be a terrorist. So I'm sorry. She used the word, and so I go with the word. She used the word citizen. If you are here in this country, and we haven't gone back to this word, documented or undocumented, if you're a citizen, fine. And even then, be careful because if you're accused of a felony and found guilty of a felony, you lose those rights. But let's just go on and say if you're a citizen. If you're not a citizen, I don't believe you're entitled to those rights. Sorry. Because those rights come in part because as an American citizen, you abide and believe in the United States Constitution. If you're not a citizen of this country, you have no responsibility to follow the Constitution. You're not a citizen. And I deal with people here who are illegal immigrants. Part of my business is what I do as a broker in real estate. And I can tell you, there's a huge illegal population in Louisville and Lexington. And they could not care less about being an American citizen and having the rights and responsibilities, other than anything that they get for free. It's a terrible mindset. And I try to make a difference in everybody's life and try to change that mindset. But if that's what she's talking about here, have benefits and responsibilities as citizens, I'm sorry, but I would disagree simply because I believe that if you're a citizen, you are entitled to those benefits and responsibilities. And I would emphasize the word responsibilities. But if you're not a citizen, then you don't have that. You don't have that skin in the game.
Thomas, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if, I believe the word that's missing from there is policy. I believe what she said was we need a policy that's inclusive. And I think that the question I have is, if the quicker path to citizenship means that most of those people that are here already become citizens,
how are you going to do that?
I don't know. It's the quicker path to citizenship.
My perception.
It's not my solution. But I think, what if, I'm not putting words in her mouth, but what if what that meant was there was a policy that included that solution, quicker path to citizenship, and if that meant that most people currently in the U.S. became citizens through that quicker path to citizenship?
I would go back to the two words, and I would still use,
right,
that you just brought up. One, a quicker path to citizenship. They're not citizens yet. Sorry. The other part is that word inclusive. I'm not really sure what that word means, inclusive. You know? I go to a lot of different meetings, and I'm not always included in the circles. I don't know what inclusive might mean to her. I don't want to put any words in her mouth either, so I don't know.
We can talk some, which is, it's sort of down here. She wants civil liberties for all immigration, all immigrants and citizens.
What does that mean?
She wants people, all people, she said human beings, to not have to face harsh realities.
I go back to what my father said.
Am I mistaken?
I go back to what my father said, life isn't fair. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. You know, my mother, different than most women at the time, my mother was a published poet in Cuba. She finished high school, and she actually was admitted into a special kind of school where very few women get to go. If you will remember, in the late 40s, early 50s, there's a lot of discrimination against women, especially in the education service. You just didn't get that. So, she came to this country, and the only job she could get was checking for broken bottles at the 7-Up plant. So, I'm sorry, life isn't fair. Now, she didn't complain about it. She just merely said, you know, that's what I got to do, that's what I've got to do. No different than I've mopped floors, and I've done everything else under the sun to be able to be where I am today. You know? So, if you are here, I mean, I don't have a heart of stone, okay? So I'm not saying, you know, to do things that are inhuman. But I'm saying at the same time, when you tie this word in civil liberties, I believe that, as this gentleman asked me a second ago about fear, this is the kind of terminology that places fear in the people. What exactly is a civil liberty? You know, exactly what is a benefit? Exactly what is a responsibility? If we don't have clear definitions to our words, words have meaning. If we don't have clear definition of words, then they can be misconstrued. They can be twisted and contorted. And they can create fear, and they can also create so many roadblocks that nothing is accomplished. So to me, if she's saying she fears that they don't have civil liberties, my attorney said one thing. If I get arrested, the first thing they have to do is read me and run away because I'm an American citizen. If I'm in Spain, they don't have to read anything to me. Okay? They just throw me in a hole and good luck to me. Now, if you're here in this country and you are here, whatever term you want to use, undocumented, illegal, by the grace of God, whatever happens to be, you're not entitled to these things because you're not an American citizen. But that doesn't mean that you should be treated inhumanely. I mean, that's what separates America from everywhere, all the other countries to begin with. But as a constitutionalist, I would say to you, being a citizen, my father and my mother are naturalized American citizens. So they have all the rights and responsibilities, the benefits. They have all of those things because they gave up what they were and who they were to become American citizens. So my point is, I would agree with somewhat, which is a quicker path. Yeah, I said that earlier. It shouldn't take 20 years. 2 to 3 years, we're all good. I think everybody could agree to that. 2 to 3 years, you either in or you're gone. You either in or you're out. What? Make the decision. But I don't believe that during that 2 or 3 year period, you should have the same rights and responsibilities that I have. I don't think so. And that would be my opinion. An opinion is not a study, or that's my opinion.
It seems like you wouldn't want to afford the same benefits and responsibilities that citizens have, but you wouldn't want to treat them inhumanely, so there's maybe some lesser level of rights that you would...
No, I said don't treat them inhumanely.
Yes, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. So there would be some lesser level of rights that you would afford illegal immigrants in terms of maybe...
All right, let me give you this example.
Possibly being a victim of a crime, or...
Yes, so let me give you this example and see if this makes sense. I'm a real estate broker. You come to me and say, Tomas, I want you to sell my house. I'll say, great, I'm more than happy to do that for you. Based on my ethics as a realtor, I owe you certain responsibilities. They call it a bundle of twigs, if you learn real estate. Okay? You got all these little twigs. 7 things that you must give your client. Okay? Now, somebody else comes to me and says, Tomas, I'm not represented by anybody, but I want to buy his house. Well, I can do both ends of the deal. I can represent the seller and I can represent the buyer. However, since you're my client, I have to give you all 7. That other person, I can't give them all 7. But I have to be honest. And so he gets 1. He actually gets 2 or 3 of the 7. And so I would say the same kind of example. We treat people humanely. I wouldn't, this is not indentured servitude, slavery, or anything else. And, I'm sorry, I just don't believe in it. But at the same time, I think that there has to be a difference. The reason that people want to come to this country is because it's about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Freedom.
Tom.
That's okay, I'm trying to.
I've heard, I think, from both speakers that it's their belief, so I would ask you this, Tomas, is it your belief that if we let everybody come to the country, and I don't want to use the term citizenship, but have legal status in the country, that's not a problem? That there's not a resource problem? And let me, before you answer, because to me, the whole basis of immigration law is based on that presumption that it's not realistic to let everybody, come. So that's a big change, and that may be your belief. You actually said that. You said earlier that
I believe everyone should be given the opportunity who wants to come to this country, to immigrate to this country, should be given the opportunity. I would say
that there's not a resource problem.
And I don't believe that it's a resource problem. But I would say something that you just said just now, I would like to point out to you. Every single policy in immigration has been done because of fear. Every single one. There's not one that has not been.
I understand the history of it and the Chinese and all that kind of thing, but I think underlying all of that is an assumption that if we just opened the doors and said, y'all come, that we'd be overwhelmed and there'd be too many people, more than we could assimilate.
I have someone that I know
the economy and into the culture.
I had someone who used to speak with, I spoke with him all the time, but he had your same point. He would say, well, just open the door and let everybody come. We'd be overwhelmed. We're going to deal with it. Well, now, let me go back and restate what I said to make sure that we're clear.
You may be right, but is that your belief?
I'll address it.
Go ahead. Go on, address it real quick.
I said to you, and I hope it was clear, I believe everyone should have the opportunity, but I think it should be done within a policy that is workable, that is enforceable. What we have now, we don't. I believe in law. I'm not an anarchist, and I believe that if you have people who immigrate here, I believe there's evil in the world. So if you have people who immigrate here for the wrong reasons, I have no problem whatsoever in locking them up. Now, this whole idea of deportation doesn't happen. So that's ludicrous. But I believe that there can be a good system of immigration based on good law, so that those people who wish to have the opportunity can have it within a time frame that would not create an abundance of illegality to have to occur. To use the current president's term of hope, you take away hope from everyone, with the system that's in place now.
Okay, why don't we bring her back in? Okay, back in. And who knows what we're going to do next? This is so crazy.
Can I make a short observation while we're in transition, specific to the points in the middle there? The reality is, exploitation, violation of civil liberties, harsh realities, also called life, and families being broken apart happens to people regardless of their status as citizens. It happens every day.
I do want to bring that up.
Period. And I think to your point, you touched on it. One thing that's interesting to me, the primary reason people want to immigrate to this country is because we're a nation of laws. And the laws mean something.
Correct.
And the rules mean something. And if you start to water things down for the sake of doing what in your gut feels like a fair thing to do, it flies in the face of the very laws that
That's correct.
place attractive in the first place,
Absolutely.
to undermine your ability to be what everybody ultimately wants in the end. And I think it's a very fine line. Nobody would wish any of those things on anyone.
Correct.
But they happen every day for
Correct.
two people
Correct.
all over.
And we have history. We have history to draw upon. As I said quickly to you,
I think we're missing some major points about this whole issue.
I think that just to address quickly what you just said here, the reason everybody wanted to be part of Rome was because Rome was about law. So that when you worked on the Roman rule, you go to sleep at night knowing that you would be waking up the next day with your head on. But when Rome came in and set Roman law in place, suddenly life expectancy went way up because of that law. So I would agree with you.
Okay, the goal for this next format, section 30 minutes, is that correct? So about 25 more minutes left because we've eaten into a little bit of it. Is for you all to just free-for-all among yourselves. But we will jump in some. We might let the audience jump in a little bit, and then the audience will have time at the very end. I will kind of jumpstart the conversation and let you know where I've seen some differences between you. Certainly right in here, there's some questions on what the definition of civil liberties might be. There's some expectation that harsh realities faced by humans are what we're trying to protect, and yet at the same time, there's a question that that's the reality of life to some degree.
And to be specific, I think that was unnecessarily hard, which is for the point of being brief. I think it's okay, but just
Good point. Good point.
clarify.
Okay, and so then there's also some. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
And then there's also some question on. I think both of you would. I know both of you want a quicker path to citizenship, a more simple path toward that citizenship, but that there might be some difference as to the benefits versus responsibilities to citizens versus to all people. Meaning, should all people just be allowed in, all people, or is there some distinction as to who should be allowed to be citizens? So, to begin, let's just say, discuss anything you want, both of you.
Sure.
To each other as much as possible as well.
Is there something you want to start with?
I'm supposed to be ladies first.
Okay. Well, and I've never intended to say that I think it's a free-for-all and everyone should be able to enter the United States without any sort of process. It's certainly within the authority of Congress to come up with immigration policy.
But they've done that. And you seem to be upset because there are eaches who have fallen out of an imperfect system. And those systems are perfect. But you're using those individual eaches.
What's an each?
And those individual cases as examples of why the whole system needs to be completely revamped.
I'm the only one that is
I think they
recommended.
both.
I'm addressing her.
Oh, okay.
Because she specifically identified people and their cases. These people made decisions to be where they were. And having suffered the consequences doesn't mean that the system is imperfect because they didn't follow the system. And if there are going to be controls, there are going to be some people who are left out. That's just the nature.
Sure, of course. What is the question?
So how would you change things?
How would I control the number of immigrants we allow into this country?
Right.
Or on that topic, the eaches, what's his name, Sylvia?
Sagger Valley.
Sagger.
That's right.
I'm sorry, there's a question in here. there's a fear that his civil liberties are being violated. True, false?
Well, I think I was trying to use the story as an example of how the system is broken. I would say that there are civil liberties concerns. For example, when we deport individuals who don't have an opportunity to have an attorney, when you're facing what feels like a criminal sanction, and you aren't afforded the same due process rights as everyone else, and let's be clear, the Fourth and Fifth Amendment don't specify between citizen and people, right? Due process is available.
Talk it out.
Well, let's get the language out. I think we can figure it out right here and now.
The United States Constitution was written in order to clearly define the powers or the duties of the three branches of government.
Sure.
The amendments were added afterwards by some of those who did not agree with the Constitution and felt that we needed to have something that clearly stated the rights and responsibilities of the individual citizen, not just definition of the parameters and boundaries of the United States government.
Well, let's look at the language.
And
So you're saying, so let me be clear here. So you're saying all of the amendments, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution included, the Bill of Rights, nada. You're saying that's somehow less valuable?
I think so.
Okay. Well, I thought you were making the distinction.
No, the distinction I'm trying to make is that you believe that everyone should be afforded the same rights and responsibilities as a citizen of the United States government.
Not true.
Because you're asking for them to have Miranda, due process.
Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the words here. And let's be specific because I can bring up another example. The text, I'm looking at Wikipedia. Is that okay with everyone? No. Okay, well, I can switch. Where do you prefer to get your...
Go to Cornell Law.
What amendment are you looking for?
Okay, so I'm looking at, let me pull up the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or acclamation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, person, building.
And so our difference here is that you believe that the term people is, to use your word here, all-inclusive. Where I believe that the Constitution begins with the phrase, we the people. And that referencing, what it's referencing is the people who inhabit and fought for to create the nation known as the United States of America. And so when you read any one of the 27 amendments of the Constitution, wherever they say the people, they are referring to American citizens. They're not referring to the people of the world.
Well, let's look
and if you go to any other country, you have no rights. You go to the other country and they want to deport you, they deport you. They want to stick you in a hole they call a jail, they'll stick you in a hole called a jail. Now, we are more civil and we are more humane in the United States of America. And certainly, as this gentleman said, there will be many times when you will see that things are done and that there's some issue because policy is such that people don't get a fair shake, let's say, to use those terms. But I believe that here we have a distinct difference in that what I consider to be the rights and the responsibilities of citizens, or what the United States Constitution has in it, what the amendments have in it, is directly to we the people, citizens of the United States, not people who are here legally or illegally who are not citizens.
So why do we have the 14th Amendment? Why do we establish citizenship in the 14th Amendment?
The 14th Amendment is only, the 14th Amendment, many people misconstrue the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment strictly dealt with the freeing of black slaves. That's all the 14th Amendment dealt with. It did not deal with any other right, whether it's what's currently before the Supreme Court or any other social issue. The 14th Amendment was written strictly because the Civil War created the emancipation, and therefore black people at that time had no vote, even if they were considered American citizens. And that's why the 14th Amendment was written to the Constitution.
So, and I don't really want to get too much into this, but you talk about in any other country. What did you say about us being more civilized?
Yes, in any other country, in most countries of the world, people who are there illegally, they are treated inhumanely. Inhumanely.
Well,
Our country doesn't do that. Now, if they don't follow, as this gentleman, one of the gentlemen out here said, it's not our fault that they came here and the system did not support their manner of coming to the United States of America. And so therefore, they have to suffer the consequences, as it were.
So first of all, sometimes our system does support them. The example I gave earlier is Cuban nationals are available.
I wasn't here when you said
that. Okay, exactly. So immigrants are treated differently sometimes based on where they're coming from. Obviously, some immigrants are granted refugee status and others are not. I don't know, without you giving me specific examples, it doesn't even matter what other countries do and how they treat their immigrants. Furthermore, for you to claim that the United States is the civilized law of the land is a bold claim. First of all, the United States is one of the only developed countries in the world that still uses the death penalty, right? We're one of the only countries in the world that still executes people. South America does not.
South America does.
In some circumstances, but it's not legal.
It's very legal in some states, in some countries in South America. Sorry.
I just don't see. So Saudi Arabia is a great example of a country that does use the death penalty. When you look at China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, these are our colleagues when it comes to the use of the death penalty. I only point that out because I don't think that I don't see how it's relevant to get into how other countries treat people and use that to dictate our own immigration policy. And for you to stand here, wait, for what you say, that we don't treat people, that we do treat immigrants with compassion, what were the words that you used?
Civil.
I don't think that is true. The majority of people deported from this country were convicted of no crime.
No, it's illegal to be here.
Thank you.
It's not illegal. It's not a crime to be here without status.
Yes, it is.
Just to clarify, we have laws, whether they're fairly or unfairly determined, whether they're fairly or unfairly implemented, is irregardless to the respect that this is a nation of laws. The laws are there. If they are here in violation of that law, that is in and of itself, fairly or otherwise, a criminal act.
No, it's not. That's not a criminal act. Crossing the border without papers sneaking in is a criminal act. But like my friend who just graduated from UL, who had a student visa, his visa expired briefly in between graduating from the University of Louisville and becoming hired as an engineer where he currently works. He committed no criminal act simply by staying here in Louisville for the brief time.
That's a criminal act.
It's not a criminal act. If it was a criminal act, you would be afforded an attorney before you went before a judge.
Not an American citizen.
There's a difference between misdemeanors and felonies. I'm not saying it's bad. It's not like having robbed someone, but it is in violation of laws. If we say that, let's remove the word criminal.
Sure.
It's in violation of the law. That's what the deep word.
We can say that, and it really doesn't even matter, but people should be afforded, when we start distinguishing between one group and another, on who's afforded due process, on who the government can hold without giving them a trial, that's gotten us into a lot of trouble in the past, and I think that it will continue to get us into trouble in the future.
Okay, may I say this at this point? Because I'm trying to keep in mind the 7 rules.
Yes. Just hit it there. Put it back up.
Okay. Because I believe that, with all due respect,
and let me pause there for just a second and say I'm thrilled that we're getting some excitement and difference, but at the same token, let's also assume positive intent from all of our.
So I was going to say
we have a difference, and let's just analyze what our core difference is.
Right, because I was going to say I'm trying not to give. Many people here probably think that I agree with you much more than they thought I was going to agree with you, and the reason for that is because I'm trying to follow the 7 rules. Okay, and so I'm not out here to give my own personal opinion of whether I believe in the death penalty or not, or anything like that. I'm really trying to speak to the things that are listed on this board, and as I was asked to respond to what you believe are needs, what you believe are solutions, and what are fears. And so I'm trying to, I don't want you to take it as a personal attack. I'm not attacking you.
We're getting very close to a couple of core philosophical differences that I want us to pursue, which would be who do the Bill of Rights apply to? Do they apply to citizens or do they apply to people? And without accusation of a difference here, let's pursue that. I think believe they apply to people. and I think they apply those citizens. Is that correct? Talk it out.
Well, right now, if you were charged with a crime, whether or not you were a citizen or an undocumented immigrant, you would have access to an attorney to go before a jury and before a judge. So I would. Okay, give me an example of why they want. I mean, we've had cases before where we've represented immigrants in criminal
Okay,
proceedings.
so I'm going to go back and see if I can restate what I said before. We are a nation of laws, as this gentleman in the back said, and I also believe that we are a nation of good people. And so, therefore, even if they are not constitutionally guaranteed due process, we make every effort in most instances, again, it's not a perfect system, in most instances, people who need legal representation, often have that available to them, even if they're not citizens of the United States of America.
So you would say not constitutionally guaranteed.
That is correct. It is not constitutionally guaranteed.
And Kate, you would say
I mean,
constitutionally
I
guaranteed.
think that we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of, Gideon, where it said that we have to have access to legal counsel. And all people, when faced with these types of, with criminal charges, are entitled by our Bill of Rights and our Constitution to have access to counsel. And the interesting thing is, immigrants charged with a crime, so who cares what crime, theft, whatever, would have access to counsel in a criminal proceeding. However, when immigrants face deportation, you have the right to go before a specific judge, an immigration judge who has limited discretion, and you are not afforded an attorney in those circumstances. In spite of the fact you face this really, I would say deportation is a pretty high consequence. So in spite of the fact that there's this high consequence, you're not afforded a counsel in those circumstances.
Okay, even though we said we weren't going to quote set them, trying not to. If you would take the time to go to the Cornell School of Law website and do a little research on exactly what the term deportation means and how one gets deported from this country. Also, when you say things like, well, they go before a certain judge only has, certain limitations. One of the things that people don't even know for themselves, American citizens, if you're charged with a felony and go before a federal judge, he doesn't have a lot of leeway, or she doesn't have a lot of leeway. So, to say those kinds of things, you're entitled. I'm not trying to take away what we want to say. But I'm saying, as what was asked of me, I believe that if you're a citizen, you will have the rights and responsibilities and the benefits of the United States Constitution. If you're not, you don't. Sorry. But in the country that we live in, we try to give everyone possible an opportunity to be represented. Sometimes they aren't. And if you're in the military, you don't want to go before a military tribunal. It's a whole different ball of wax. So, if we're being asked a question, I'm just trying to respond to the question. I do not believe that, in your words, undocumented people should have every single right that's guaranteed under the Constitution. Because if that were the case, then I should be able to go to Saudi Arabia. I'm an American citizen, and Saudi Arabia should give me every single right and responsibility that I have as an American citizen.
I'm not saying that. And also, I think it's funny that neither of us are criminal lawyers and we're discussing this particular issue, because the truth is, we really don't have a lot of experience when it comes to it, most likely.
If I might, I think you've already established that you believe that there are variations of the rights applied to people depending upon the situation. And you're saying absolutely not. You have a more absolute feeling that you have to be a citizen to get the full rights of the United States government.
So,
End of point. We don't need any more to go on.
Yes, number 7. It's point number 7.
So both of you guys have kind of thrown out whenever we said, what's the problem, we can change it. I think you said throw it all out, and you said more effective policy. And really, that's not painting any kind of picture in my head at all.
Right.
If you could go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow with some supreme power, what would be the one thing that you would change that could help most people that are trying to legally become citizens or are be here legally. I won't even throw the word citizenship in it. And at the same time, protect American taxpayers so that we don't implode based on the weight. Because for the people that come here, we're not going to be able to say, oh, here's your job, here's your house, here's all this stuff. We can't promise them a job and a way of life and all that. So if they're coming here, then somehow there are resources that are going to have to be expended. So you don't have to limit it to one, but what would be some place that we could start that would make the most sense to you guys and your all's expertise on the topic?
I would say the first place, which is not the dreamscape, the first place that would absolutely, I think, highlight your response to your concern about spending and would have the most impact right away would be to immediately stop the majority of deportations. Obama's administration has deported more undocumented immigrants in his short term in office than Bush did. It's incredibly expensive, and the majority of those people are swept into the system without committing any crime. I mean, we disagree on whether or not being here as an undocumented is crime, but if you can excuse that for the moment, I would say tomorrow morning we could do one thing. It would be to stop the majority of deportation.
Stop deporting people?
Stop the majority of deportations.
How does that save? How does that save money? If people are still here illegally, they at some point violated the law, and we just told everybody that's okay.
Well, when you ask about the cost, most people don't. Well, maybe people do know. Like before you face deportation, you're held in detention centers, which are pretty much like jails, and there are several regional ones across the country. They cost about $134 by the government's own account, so you can be skeptical. But on average, it costs about $134 a night to house these individuals. So we have the same cost that you would incur if you were imprisoning someone. There is, even though we think a faulty justice system in place, there is a justice system in place that employs immigration judges. That's expensive. The actual deportation, the bus or the flight, there are costs associated with that. Most of it have to do with detention and enforcement. So I know that you're concerned about expenses, and I would.
Well, I don't feel like that protects taxpayers because it gives a green light to people to say, hey, you're here, we're cool with that. And why not just eliminate the whole department?
How does someone being here cost more money?
How does I'm just saying that it sends a message to everybody that you can be here illegally and you don't really care. Because if you're not going to take action, then it's just.
Answer your question as well, I would guess if they are getting benefits, such as welfare or.
No undocumented immigrants are eligible for benefits like that.
Okay. Tomas, did you have thoughts?
Well, I would address myself to this gentleman here. If I go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow morning, and I have all this power. But in any case,
wouldn't worry about immigration, would you?
But it just deals with immigration.
Unless you take me with you.
Yeah. Let's get on this.
You asked me, Tomas, what do you think of it? So what I would say is this: if I had that kind of power, the first thing I would do is I would dealing with immigration. The first thing that I think that I would do is to try to make sure that people understand that the reported 11 to 12 million is really more 18 to 19 million who are here, and that there is no way that you can put them on a bus and deport them. There is no way that you can do anything like that. And that is not a solution for the immigration issue. So if I got up tomorrow morning and had that power, the first thing I would do is try to clearly state that, be the best communicator and leader that I could be, and tell America that that's what the truth is. The second thing I would do is I would say that, as I said earlier today, we need to have law that works, that's enforceable when it comes to immigration. And there is no reason that our great country cannot have the manpower in place to facilitate that. And we have to stop being ideologues. I don't want to hear that you're a Republican and he's a Democrat and we'll never meet anywhere. I don't want to hear about saying kumbaya and holding hands. That doesn't work either. And when you ask me to address the issue of money, I'm sure that it costs money to keep someone in prison, whether they are American citizens or not. But there is a reason why you're placed in prison. You've broken the law, you've done some criminal activity, or for some reason somebody believes that you have. And this, I guess, would go back to what I believe character means. We are a nation of character. And as character, that means you can't just say to people, hey, it's all good, don't worry about it. There has to be an understanding that if you commit an act which is against the law, there are repercussions for your activity. And so it might cost us $200 a night to put somebody in jail because they've done something inappropriate, illegal, whatever you want to call it. That's just the cost of doing business. But part of the cost of doing business that is happening right now as we speak, we have all kinds of expenses, and I'm so sorry that I'm going to disagree with Kate. There are hospitals all over California, Arizona, that have closed their doors because they've been broke by people who are here as undocumented people or illegal people, have gone in and used those facilities to the point that they had to close. That was money coming out of taxpayers' pockets for that particular issue. Kate?
I gotta tell you. Yeah, that's an opinion. I've never seen anything like that about a hospital closing.
It is not an opinion. I'll be happy to give you, we're not supposed to do that. I'll go ahead and say this is my opinion, just to go ahead and alleviate the situation. I'll say it's my opinion that all these hospitals closed, in my opinion, because of what I said.
So can I ask this question of both of you? Whether or not the hospital's closed is providing health care for undocumented immigrants at a cost that the rest of the country is bearing?
I want to respond to this, but I want to respond to something that Tomas said. I'm a little confused. So you had stated that it's not a reality to think that we can put 20 million people on a bus and deport them.
Can't do it.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, it would be a huge undertaking to be able to manage that.
I have a background in philosophy. Logically, rationally, can't be done.
I agree. The system that we have in place now, and I thought I was pretty specific, whenever anyone is deported, unless they're right there at the border and they're kicked back over, they spend time in a detention center. We have a major one in Chicago where most Kentuckians are routed to. They stop off at Boone County. I've helped do legal intake there at Boone County, so I can attest that I've seen that with my own eyes. It's a local jail, but it gets federal dollars to house undocumented immigrants. So a lot of our major enforcement expenses, a lot of reason why deporting 20 million people would be an impossible undertaking is because of these detention centers and because we're detaining people.
I didn't say that. That's not what I said.
Okay, so that was why I was a little confused, because we agreed, I think, on the idea that deporting that many individuals is unreasonable, and then at the end,
I made the statement based on
people have good reasons for being in prison, but the reason those people are in prison is because of their immigration status.
I responded to the question that was asked of me, and I responded in saying that the concept that has been placed out there by many people who have run for office and people who are currently in office of removing illegal, undocumented, whatever people from the country known as the United States of America. My opinion is that really cannot be done. If you're just logical and practical and rational, that really cannot be done. Not because, well, that means we can't have them detained. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
So then what's your major problem with deporting that many people?
Okay. Let's do the logistics of it, if you want to do the logistics of it. How many buses would you need to deport them?
How are you going to round them up first?
Okay. How are you going to round them?
And where are you going to keep them until you deport them?
No. We have places to keep, but how are you going to round them up? Okay. That's why I say it's illogical and irrational to think that you can do that.
Oh, I agree with you.
Okay. But to me, that's not really the issue with immigration. The issue with immigration is that we have poor policy, poor laws that have been created because of fear factors from the beginning, from 1790 to the present. And they've just been piled on one after the other. And I'm saying that in order to alleviate the issues of immigration, we need to have, as I think we both said on the other part, a policy and a law in place that is enforceable, workable. Now, I'm not against deportation, and again, I didn't want to use this word because I don't believe you're actually using it correctly. But to have someone removed from our country because of something that they did, I
or
believe
because of their immigration status.
That would be an illegal act. So something that they did that was illegal, I have no problem in removing them from here. Or, again, if we the people say, no, Tomas, we don't want to deport them, we're going to go ahead and pay taxpayer dollars and build more prisons and detention centers, and we'll just stick them in there. If that's the voice of the people, that's why we have a Republican democracy. If that's the voice of the people, okie dokie. I would hope that my rhetoric, my words, I hope I can influence people to say, no, that's not the right path. But it is the voice of the people.
So we definitely have one difference that's just come out, but I don't believe it's a core difference, but let's at least state it, which is that you believe immigration status is not a criminal act. Having an invalid immigration status is not a criminal act. Tomas, you believe criminal act. True, false?
I believe that it's an illegal act. That means that, this word, illegal means it's not in keeping with the law. If you do something that is not in keeping with the law.
There are civil laws and there are criminal laws.
Right. There are all kinds of laws.
Right.
Okay.
That's where we're splitting hairs.
It doesn't really matter.
I don't want to split the hairs. I'm just saying, any law that is broken, in my opinion, any law that is broken requires some reaction to it. So if your punishment for that, or your reaction for committing something that is against a law is deportation, then I guess that's what it is. But
you're okay with that, and you're not okay with that.
I'm okay with it.
I mean, you said you don't think that mass deportation of 20 million people is a...
Now, we're talking about two different things. So, I mean, this is where I think we're becoming like the same thing she was saying here about criminal and civil. You know, deportation of a person, of an individual, is not what I'm talking about when we're dealing with immigration policy. In my opinion. I don't believe that that's what the discussion is. If you're talking about your friend, someone you know, an acquaintance that you have, you know, I know someone who is here, came here to this country illegally, married an American woman, had a child. He went to immigration, said, you know, I've been working here, paying taxes for 10 years, so forth and so forth. They told him, no problem, you can become an American citizen. However, we will deport you immediately and you can't come back for 10 years because that's the law. Now, you know, he came here knowing that there could be a problem. And so when it finally came to the point where the problem came up and they said the solution for us in America is to deport you, I have no problem with that. Even though I know the fellow's a good man, I know he's worked hard, I know he's paid his taxes, it's all well and good, but he's not a citizen in the United States, and so therefore he does not have the United States Constitution to fall back on.
So, like, let's say a random person is traveling to the United States and they have a tourist visa. Let's just throw this out there. And they get, I don't know, they get a DUI. You believe that that person should not have access to they shouldn't have a lawyer, they shouldn't have a regular criminal proceeding, they shouldn't go before a judge because they're a tourist, because they're not a citizen of the United States. We should just go ahead and murder them. Who cares? Let's hang them. They don't have the same rights.
Okay. First of all, I never said any such thing, but I'm not going to go there. In my experience, and I actually have it in the folder over there, I have every single type of visa that the United States government issues. It's a very long list. And each one of those visas, the United States government recognizes certain responsibilities and rights.
Sure.
So it's not an across the board sweeping with a big giant brush.
Some non-citizens do have access to civil liberties.
No. They have access to legal benefits
that are enumerated in the Constitution.
No, that are set forth by the Department of State of the United States of America. Those are called policies. These are not in the United States Constitution.
As part of the visa issue.
That is correct. That's correct. That's correct. I have presented myself in a number of these discussions on immigration, and as a responsible person, I have done tons of research. And one of the first things I did was I went to the United States government site to pull up every visa that's out there because I wanted to know. And so I would say to you that my experience and my knowledge is that policy, which is not law, policy dictates from either the Department of State, or actually it can come from a treaty, it can come from all kinds of different places where certain people from other countries who are here in this country do something that we consider to be illegal in this country. They then have certain rights, they have certain benefits, to use your word, but not because it's guaranteed by the United States Constitution, because it's guaranteed by the Department of State.
So you're saying there's specific schemes, there's specific policies or laws that we should maintain for each individual visa holder, distinct of other visa holders, and distinct of other citizens.
This is not my opinion.
Distinct of, it's not?
It's not my opinion. In the listing from the United States government.
You don't think that part of the reason why these rights are afforded to individuals might have something to do with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution?
No, I do not. I believe that the Constitution and any attachment to the Constitution, which would be the 27 Amendments, I believe that those are all for United States citizens. This is not beyond the world. I mean, this is where we differ.
What about equal protection under the law? What about treating one person equal to another person, regardless of...
And where do you find that? And where do you find that?
In the 14th Amendment.
Therefore, it's for United States citizens. It's not for the world.
Okay, so that's the fundamental difference.
Sounds like fundamental.
I mean, and I don't think that all of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are applicable to everyone. Clearly, some distinctions are made within the language of certain bills and certain parts of the Constitution that say citizen, others say people. Obviously, some things are very specific in terms of elections. So I don't think that they're applicable to everyone. I think when the distinction is not made and the word people is used, those are applicable to everyone. I think freedom of religion is applicable to everyone. I think freedom of speech is applicable to everyone. I believe due process is applicable to everyone.
And is there a criteria that you're choosing one versus the other, is or isn't?
By the language used. I think that specific words were chosen with specific meaning, and so when the Constitution talks about voting, it talks about citizens. When it talks about due process, it talks about people. So I think that's where our founders decided to, and carefully so, to
put those disagree, saying
Bill of Rights because I believe that using our own logic, you get into trouble when you try to interpret something because of words, because of language and words. The 14th Amendment never applied to everyone. It only applied to black people who had been slaves before. That's all the 14th Amendment. But people today, many people, try to use that amendment and shape it all around, no different than, let's say, the Second Amendment. For years and years, people tried to fight that amendment based on the beginning says,
is that an opinion?
Abolition. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that if
your opinion, okay.
No, what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is that we can all have opinions by which then we interpret words in the Constitution or the 27 Amendments.
And you're interpreting that
I'm saying that I believe that she herself has already said that it's an interpretation of the 14th Amendment.
You're attacking her.
I'm not.
But what I want to find out is your interpretation of the 14th is that it is only for black people, for slaves. That's what I understood you to say.
In my studies,
that's your opinion.
In my studies of the United States Constitution and the amendments, in different universities, different places that I have studied the Constitution, it has been presented to me. Okay, well, it's been presented to me this way. And so I believe that looking at the 14th Amendment, I think it's applicable to a certain period in time and a certain group of people who should have been entitled to citizenship and were not at that moment in time.
Do you agree that there's disagreement between your interpretation and the one that others have?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You know,
All 27 amendments.
And he brings up a good point. According to the ground rules that we are to clarify opinion from fact, and it is
Right.
true, you are correct that there was a statement that was made as though it was fact. So thank you for bringing that up.
Back to the broader issue of immigration.
And in fact, it's definitely time to open up for items discussion. So let's try to limit it to 3 cocktails.
Alan, I have an elephant in the room that I've just been dying to ask. And so
Tom has a whole list of elephants.
And so I don't know where this is going, but someone said this to me today, an absentee audience member, when they heard that I was coming to do this, asked this question, so it's not even my question. But if we are talking about solutions that are simpler policy, clearer cut, easier to administer, and faster than 20 years. I think so. Just on that broadness, we have some agreement that ought to be. And both also have said something close to everyone should have the opportunity to immigrate here who wants to. That's your language, but it's kind of included in yours. I mean, yours might be broader, but at least it's that inclusive, right? What about national security? What about terrorists? What about how do we protect ourselves from 9/11?
That's entirely outside the realm of the discussion.
I'm sorry?
That's entirely outside the realm of the discussion.
Okay, so let me pause here for a moment. Let me pause here for a moment. We're in the audience participation now, and let's keep these to 3 minutes tops, because we only have 14 minutes left. So 3 minutes tops to answer, to at least talk to this.
There's so many.
And, okay, so Tom is going to make a list. Okay, go ahead.
Can I make a counter proposal? I think we have 14 minutes. I really, and I bet other people here, I feel like there's a bunch of elephants. You raised one of them. I'd like to throw them out on the floor and not discuss them. I just want to throw them out there because it's just to make this whole conversation. Because with all due respect, your opinion on the other things is. I think we should just open it up to the group. But that's a really good point. There's a national security issue. But the elephant in the room for me, there's a couple of them I'm going to throw it out, but the thing that's I'll leave the ones most interesting to me at the end. There's a key thing that wasn't talked about, which is the labor. We don't have a voice of labor here, where if you bring in people, it's going to have an effect of lowering the wage. It just really, I believe. Thank you. I suspect it will. So there's that voice. That's one of the things that wasn't addressed here. So the big question that everybody keeps dancing around is, wait a minute, if we just open the borders, tons of people are going to come. There's an assumption that nobody knows that.
Right.
Nobody knows whether that's true.
We make a lot of claims as to all these people just dying to come into the United States.
And who knows?
There's a second part to that. Is like through political exploitation. If the party seeks to exploit all these voters, all these potential voters, giving them stuff, then you're going to get flooded with people that come for the free stuff.
So I throw that
political party.
But there's a second part to it.
But my most, and you can address that. My most important piece, though, is the reason this is so hard to talk about is because ultimately the whole conversation is dishonest. I mean, we all benefit from the labor that those undocumented workers, illegal immigrants use. Okay, we benefit from that. It has an effect. So it's dishonest. The whole conversation, everybody kind of dances around. Talk about an elephant. We dance around the fact that our economy needs them. That's my opinion, but our economy needs those workers. If they weren't here, we would still function. I'm not saying that we need them, it would all collapse. But the fact is that they're here and we get benefit, and they do benefit the society. So we have to address that when we talk about, keeping the floodgates. We do have to have laws. So that's a huge issue that wasn't really talked about, is how, there are resources to the society. But that's,
before you go on, let me say one thing about Tom. Is that good, Tom?
How about letting the audience?
I just want to say, it's all opinion, okay?
Sure.
So it's all opinion.
Because nobody knows.
Yeah. Okay, it's all opinion.
I wanted to, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Immigration
You have
is a problem forever in this country. But in my opinion, it's become accelerated since Vietnam era. For one thing, my observation was, in my opinion, high school kids quit working. They wouldn't work on farms, they wouldn't do manual labor. Also, our country has aborted 50 million people, half of them today will be in the workforce. We have created, by Americans' slothfulness, a situation where the opportunities for immigration is here, and now we think we would have it. America can solve that problem if we would improve our work ethics among our own people and stop our votes from so.
Well, I know,
I would go back, if we're just listening to the elephants in the room. One is the absolute fear that our society has. That element of fear, my opinion, is of the white Anglo-Saxon white power structure is inherent, I think, of this whole question of immigration, not so much of immigration as it is of cultural change, in which the white loses power. So the immigration is I believe, a symptom of a cultural clash that we're not wanting to talk about, so we talk about immigration. It gets into some of these, this gentleman brought up, or this, we fear it, but we cannot seem to discuss that cultural clash that we're dealing with.
I don't see that as the overriding problem. Most people in our generation, when I go to a meeting, half the people in there are from other countries. India primarily. They're all different countries. It's very diverse in the workplace, and also women in the workplace. And I think most people have grown to understand that they benefit from that diversity. I think that what people are really afraid of is the California effect, which you spoke to it. It's kind of opinion. It's my opinion too. But whenever you start giving all these benefits and everything that are taxpayer funded, then you end up sinking the base. You can't sustain that. And then there are cities in California that are filing for bankruptcy. California is billions and billions and billions of dollars in debt with no hope of ever getting out of it. And so how do you remain fiscally responsible? I like cats. I'd like to have 30 of them, but at some point, I don't want to see a cat suffer. I really don't. But at the same time, I can only have so many cats before things start getting out of hand. And so I think that's what people are really afraid of. It's just how do we balance this where that a nation that's built on laws and an economy can sustain itself.
Of course,
we're at 2 minutes. So because we're at 2 minutes, we just got a whole lot out. I've got them on the board. The other final, okay, keep it short, 1 minute.
I sustain on those elephant or large mouse. But I think the discussion got confused because we got on this topic of citizen versus. To me, there's 3 categories. There's undocumented / illegal people here illegally. There's legal immigrants. I think it's a whole other cat. And citizen. We got into this whole thing around citizen versus illegal.
So what's the
I think it would have been better to clarify the discussions about people being here with legal status.
True immigration.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that they become citizens. That's a later. That I don't think has. It's a first person to immigration, but it's not really what immigration is about. First step. Nobody becomes an instant citizen. Okay, they become illegal or undocumented. And I think it would have been clearer for discussion if we had made the parameters up front. I'm not sure which one we were talking
If you
about.
define those terms better, I agree with that.
Help me plan the next event. Seriously. Help me plan the next event. Seriously.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Let's do a final comment, 2 minutes each. Anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to close? You don't even have to, but if you want to close with something, feel free.
I'm usually the last one to say something.
Go for it.
But I'm going to let Tomas start because I always start.
Well, let me begin by first saying thank you all being so patient and being here and listening to many different opinions, as all of this really is an opinion and interpretation. The myriad of problems that are associated with immigration, they can't be resolved, just as you said, citizens don't happen overnight, problems can't be resolved overnight. And there are many people who will have to agree to disagree. And one of the things that I would hope that we could all do is follow along with something like this, the 7-step business here, because I think that much more can be resolved if we can speak civilly with one another and not take affront or take anything personal. When I was asked to do this panel thing for immigration, I said to a number of people, there is no way in the time frame that we have that I can even begin to talk about things. And I apologize if I led us astray. I was merely trying to follow the 7 rules and just going off of what I was told to respond to things. There's so much I could say. But certainly there are tons of white elephants in the room, pink ones and purple ones as well. I believe that Kate has brought forth some very interesting positions, which we will hear from many people. I mean, it is part of what we have as a nation. We are a nation of people that have a variety of opinion and a variety of observations and a variety of, as we have here, needs and fears and solutions. And I think this kind of format allows us to address some of those things. So, again, I would love anyone who wants to speak to me afterwards. I'm more than happy to speak to them. Probably some of you I know looked at me and I was smiling and nodding my head back and forth. So I'm more than happy to talk to them. But again, I want to thank Alan, Kate, and everyone else who's here for participating this evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate you putting these forums together. I'm sure it is a challenge, and I appreciate the reasons behind it. So thanks for your commitment. I ultimately believe that actually Tomas and I both have a lot in common. Obviously, look at our boards. Yeah, we were still successful at finding things to argue about. Probably because we're both constitutionalists, so that's the exciting part. But ultimately, I just want to say that I think it's pretty clear to the majority of Americans that the immigration system we have in place is broken. This isn't anything new. We revise laws all the time. And we've had bad laws in the past. But without a doubt, regardless of what we say, right here and now, our country is changing. We are becoming more diverse. And the way to move forward is to welcome aspiring citizens and make sure that everyone has a clear and understandable roadmap to citizenship. So thank you so much.
Okay, my final comment? Yes. First of all, also to the coaches, Mike and Lynn, thank you very much. We love suggestions, and we really do try to take them. It's crazy hard, so fill in anything you can and put it on the table outside. Also, there's a little, on the back of it, there's a quote by Alexander Hamilton that shows that in 1787, we had the same type of problem of polarization, and that it's very important to believe that the other side also has good motives. This talks about that there are people on both sides that have good and bad motives. This is Alexander Hamilton, way back when, talking about it. So, what? I'm sorry?
He was an immigrant.
No, he wasn't.
Maybe. There are people that might disagree.
There's no law.
Okay. my challenge is that you go and when you're having dining room conversations, when you are writing on Facebook, do not make false accusations about the other side. Do not say, this is what they believe. You probably don't know what they believe because you've probably not been to enough of these or talked to enough people on the opposite side to really know it. Instead, you've read an article that told you that. Okay, so really pause and consider what the other side's really thinking. Consider that they really do have good motives. Before you write on Facebook, pull up these ground rules and make sure you're living by them. Okay? And our Facebook will get totally different than it is today. So thank you for coming, and Lynn has a door prize.
So is there anybody who wants to put their business card in who didn't yet, or who has, because there aren't very many in there. So, do you have a business card? All right.
But this is very interesting.
This is, anybody else have one? Yeah, put one in. Okay, so this is a coffee card with a twist. Now here's the twist.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah.
Okay. I told you did.
Good, sir.
You might don't get it. Okay, good. All right.
It's illegal.
Okay, so there's a coffee card in here, and here's the deal. There are instructions that come with it, and the instructions say, use the coffee card, buy your own coffee, and then tell the barista to use the remainder on the card to buy for the person behind you.
Cool.
So it's a pay it forward card, and then email me and tell me what that experience was like. Okay? Is everybody whose name in here game for that?
There we go.
It says Ben Sinninger?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank
It's not in there. All
Where will you
right.
be going for
Thank
coffee
you.
tomorrow?
Good luck. Have fun with
He's not
that.
going to pay it forward to you.
If I'm behind, then
He's following you out the door.
Okay, we do these the fourth Tuesday of every other month, so it'll be May, I think that's the 28th of May. So we don't know our topic yet, so if you've got ideas, please tell us. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.